Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you everybody for being on time, whoever arrived on time, and at the end of, like when you're leaving the space, everybody who made it earlier, you will get 2 free postcards instead of just 1 for making it on time. Yes, thank you for showing up to chat about this specific topic on a Saturday afternoon, and my name is Pathum Megodawatha. I'm I'm a co-founder and a type director. I'm a type designer. I design fonts. That's my scene. Mooniat is our little studio. We work on Sinhala, Tamil, English, trilingual type, and we've been operating for last 10 years and kind of under the rocks. But now after a decade, we are coming out and kind of talking about our work. And this whole conference. This bit, Design Dialogues, is about discussing what is a nation, what is our nation, and how can we use design to articulate that. And this comes from our decade of work in developing these typefaces, because letter forms are like fundamental elements which makes up our culture, identity, and there are going to be more panels coming up. I think you know about the program, but now we'll go into this specific panel. I'm your moderator today, and I have 2 very exciting panelists to discuss about this topic. So I have Randhula de Silva. She's the founder and chair of Good Life X, and she works at the intersection of strategy, creative leadership, all these things. I don't want to bore you with like reading out the whole bio. It just doesn't make sense. You can look her up, LinkedIn, all these things are there. And Shiva is from India originally, but he's been running design businesses. He's a design leader. He runs a design conference, Design Up in India. He has worked for international companies and built things on his own and then sold those companies to these big companies. So we are going to be talking about this interesting idea of design and South Asian identities in business. So since I'm the curator of these talks for each panel, I'm going to sort of set what we call in Sinhala nimittak again. So I'm just going to do the nimitta or the setup. I don't know. I don't have an English like a better word for that. No? Okay, so while the slide is coming up, it's basically the value for South Asian, the term South Asian has been just like picking up. You know, just a few years ago, the first South Asian Marvel hero came out, Miss Marvel, and I feel, you know, I felt that, because I felt like, okay, now they have started exploiting this as well for profit. But it's good, you know. Do you feel represented? I don't know. Is there a slide? Okay, that's fine. We all know what I'm talking about. Hopefully. Yes, yeah, okay, cool. So, I would like to invite you both, so let's get started on this conversation. The way that this is going to run is, you know, it's called a dialogue because it's not just a panel. We want to have your engagement as well, so we're going to ask us a few questions, then start from there and go. When you're leaving, please make sure there are some sticky notes over there, and that is our KPI for these dialogues, right? If you put your ideas and comments in these pillars, you can see you have some sticky notes already from the morning discussions. So if we have more sticky notes for this topic, we'll follow up on this further on, yeah? And if you don't put anything up, you know, these things will not happen again. Cool, thank you. Okay, so,
South Asian identities under such freezing climatic conditions, just setting the limit thing.
Yes, and I think this is also like, you know, we have all these shiny things here and then undone things that we are trying to build up, and that is a very typical thing in Sri Lanka. We see, we want to build big things, and we start with a big house, halfway done, so that's kind of a nimitta as well. This space itself, I think, is a good nimitta. So I would like to start with Shiva. And this, you could both jump in as well. So there are buzzwords and terms like, sustainability, and then global south, in the mainstream politics, arts, cultural work, that are picked up and then they are chewed and then just, put out from the machine. I think sustainability is one such word. What is with the term South Asian that's been, picked up really well recently? My slide had all these images from, Apple Music was curating South Asian artists, Spotify was curating South Asian artists. It's a thing, like we have South Asian arts festivals happening even here. So this term South Asian, is it any different? Is it a distributed identity or is it grounded in geography? Let's start.
Okay, so to start, my name is Shiva. Good to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Pathum, I think I generally talk about this from the perspective of food. It's lunch, we've all had food. It's probably a good idea to kind of start with that. There is a place in Tamil Nadu. I'm from Tamil Nadu, by the way, not very far from here as a crow flies, but as flight flies very far. There's a place in Tamil Nadu called Chettinad. I'm sure you've heard of this place called Chettinad. So Chettinad has got something called Chettinad chicken curry. And unfortunately, if you go to Chettinad, it's just called chicken curry. It's not called Chettinad chicken curry. That's exactly what South Asian is. Our identities are actually seen from outside as a voyeur and kind of given a name in one sense. So I would say it's a kind of a voyeuristic perspective of a collective. And you and I know South Asia is not one thing. I'll be surprised, even if a geographical location is one thing, every 20 kilometers, the souring agent changes, tamarind in one place, some other mangoes in another place to sour. So it's quite different from each place. And so is the culture, so is the language, so is the slang that we use, so is how we have grown up through influences. So my favorite actor is not your favorite actor. So it's exactly that. I think there's a bunch of personal identities, in my opinion. Personal identities that have formed over time, and there is a collective thread that connects it in some way. And South Asian identity is kind of falling outside. I personally, given a choice, I would not call it South Asian identity. I would call it a collective of personal identity. It doesn't matter where it is from. So that goes back to the idea of geographical location. In my opinion, it's the diaspora, and geographical location does not matter. I know that great amount of Tamil literature, music, and art is coming out now from Europe. It's coming out from Paris in mix of French and Tamil. In London, there's so much of work happening on that stuff. So I would think it's more about the diaspora, not necessarily location. So in short, if I want to say this, I think we've got to look into ourselves to where the identity is and not go on somebody else telling us your South Asian identity. And the second thing is that it's a diaspora and not necessarily connected through a culture and a heritage rather than connected through anything else.
Okay, sure. Absolutely resonate with what you mentioned, Shiva. And I love the fact that you started with food. Just took me straight back into a conversation I recently had with somebody specializing in identity of Sri Lankan identity of tourism here. He's a very enthusiastic person, come with a lot of experience from Europe, he's Sri Lankan, but was diaspora and now back. And he was very enthusiastic about coconut sample, coal sample, and was saying how this should be standardized. Because coal sample should there should be a standard, like the Nana Kade can't have like half done coal sample and somewhere else can't have like the fully fledged Tamas coal sample. Like that has to be standardized. Who should be the certified body of coal sample? And I never imagined that I'd fight back on coal sample, but I did. And this is exactly the point that you brought out of how important it is to maintain, remain, and really flourish and thrive in that diversity of having multitudes of pose and all, because it is personal identity. Be it the Nanakale pose and all, or the Antambas kitchen pose and all, or my grandmother's pose and all, it is a cultural narrative on its own, and there's no single thing, recipe or a standard that you can pin down as South Asian, Sri Lankan pose and all. And this is what truly makes South Asia so rich and diverse. And I think what we need to unplug or get away from is coming into our identities from a Western gaze. This is exactly what's happening right now. So the gaze is what my friend was talking about, the standardization of the fact that it needs to be, this uniform thing, versus allowing all of the multitudes to really remain as it is and even evolve. To have beetle now come up in our cocktails. All of a sudden we are paying $5,000 to drink a cocktail which has refined gin and tastes like gula. You could buy it for $10, but we still drink it, and it's cool. It's actually quite an interesting thing that it got full circle that way. And it's not only served in Colombo but also in London. And that's where I think the diaspora comes in, and where you go beyond the Western gaze to really embrace the value that we have of our identities and turn the table around to say, this is how we serve each other. So I think for me, this is what's changing in South Asia and what needs to change in South Asia.
Okay. About the standardization, I'll just add the footnote and move on. Like nasi lemak, the dish was actually standardized by the government. Okay, this is the thing. So there is space to, I think, also to do certain things when you take control though. I'm just thinking, I don't know. That later, yes. So, to Randhula, so your work is deeply grounded in regenerative ecosystems, and something I really love about the work that you do is how arts and creativity is like integral to the work that you do. It's not an afterthought, it's not about just, okay, like how do we present this idea once you like think about some strategy. It's integral, it's very like it's fundamental to the work that you're doing. So what is truly like South Asian or regional or true to your work, the work that you do and the workplace that you run, the way that you approach your work? And then you can answer this or you can just brush it off as well. What is your relationship with design in your practice as you understand design?
Thank you, Madam. That's a good question, but also something that I think I'll enjoy answering, because the work of Buddha effects that you were referring to is, I think, understood by a niche community for absolutely for who we are, just like what you define it to be. So for context, for those who are not familiar with our work, we work with entrepreneurs as well as creatives, but all in the name of creating value with what we have in Sri Lanka, and adding value to things that we are really overlooking or not counting as valuable, and presenting it to the world or to Sri Lanka back in a much more elevated way to seizing its true value. And this could be in agriculture, tourism, or in business overall. And creativity plays a huge role in this, because for us, entrepreneurship, business, or innovation can't exist without creativity. It's not about saying how flashy can we make this packaging. For us, creativity goes way beyond that. It's to understand the gaps between a narrative or a product. It's the taste profile of the product. It's the story that you tell in the product, but also how you treat and work with the farmers. All of this comes with expanding the way that you look at the world, expanding the way that you treat your people or add value to what you see as valuable and take to the market. So for us, creativity is a must-have in the work that we do, not in the form of just aesthetics, but really going beyond that and looking at imagination overall and solving problems in a much more systemic way. So creativity for us is basically connecting the dots, and that's the fundamentals of what we do. But because we operate in the spaces that are perhaps in the old school sense in the 90s, 80s, industrial sense, is basically agriculture or farming or whatever, and our job is to turn it sexy. I'm just using these words because it's more relatable. And we are often misunderstood as, oh, not-for-profit, oh, charity. That's not what we do. So I think coming up with a new narrative, serving the world with a new value proposition, serving South Asia and Sri Lanka with a new value proposition can easily be misunderstood. And I think this is the intersection that we always operate in. It can be very confusing to ourselves, but it also can be very confusing to people outside because it's very hard to put a nail down on what this is because we are trying to change something as we operate in it. And what are we trying to change? It's a value that we claim for ourselves in the world when we take the value propositions of Sri Lanka and its services or products out. So it's not an advertising agency. It's not that we're not a creative firm. We are catalysts for businesses and creatives. But what we do is we work in the intersections of identity, of business creating value, or disrupting the stories that we tell ourselves and really creating new value that can really elevate us to a rightful place. And that could easily be misunderstood. This is why creativity plays a huge role in what we do in framing that narrative. And also, it takes a lot of showing and telling. Because I could talk as much as I want here or anywhere else, but it's still very abstract. So what we do really, especially through our work with creatives, is showing and telling, and this could be in forms of exhibitions or storytelling or experimentation, or putting them in a room together with scientists and entrepreneurs to come up with an entirely different product or value proposition than we would have thought of the day before. So in short, I think that is it.
Awesome, thank you. So that's our round one, and as a certain limit to round two, this term, like you kind of push back, okay, like South Asian, it's a voyeurism sort of thing, but this is my personal experience. Back in 2017-18, Sinhala wasn't in any of the baskets of type design projects that was being done globally, because Indian languages would just have mainland Indian scripts, and Sinhala and Maldivian script, Tana scripts would be just ignored by the majority typeface projects or design projects. So when a global firm design typefaces, they kind of go, commission someone, and then those guys go and commission other designers to extend the script support to these languages. So they would do Indian language support project. Southeast Asian languages would have Myanmar, like Burmese, all these languages. But because the term was Indic scripts or Indian languages, our scripts, both Sinhala and Tana scripts, were not being included in these bigger projects. But it was in 2018 we actually pushed back and said, okay, like we need to introduce to type design competitions, okay, South Asian scripts, this is a new category. Like we need to include Tana and these other scripts along with the Tibetan from the up north. There is a utility to these words as well. So with that, I would like to go to Shiva. What does a truly South Asian identity would look like in a global business context? What does it look like now? We can, for you, is it a style, a process, philosophy, something else? And this is, reaching out to you on your experience in working with global brands, building things in India and the region, and now running a company that's based in US.
Yeah, so let me first go back to the niggling problem of templatization that we talked about earlier. I think it's good to kind of, or making it, what's the word that we use? What's nasilema? What do you No, nasilema, what do they do to it? Standardization. So let's talk about that part, because it's kind of important. I think it's the predictability is honestly from the West, in my opinion. Like having to have things that is predictable and actually structured in a extremely predictable way. So I know after 4 steps I get nasilama or polsam. It's probably not a good thing. The reason I'm saying it is this. I'm not saying it in reference to the earlier conversation. I'm talking in reference to how we run our businesses. I don't know about Sri Lanka, but India is chaotic as you know, it's pretty chaotic. And most of the stuff that we do has been, actually our businesses have been responses, if you know what I mean. It is actually a response to an event or a trigger that actually makes you go further. And that's not about being predictable. And that's actually, now I know that that's what is being appreciated by everybody, because when you get closer to a situation, the situation could be good, bad, ugly, whatever the situation is, I think people are expecting a response. And the response is probably what you get from a so-called South Asian business. And the Indian business are proving again and again, and especially creative businesses, are proving again and again that with the short turnaround time, without compromising on the quality of the output that comes, we can actually give you the stuff. I mean, look at the difference, right? It's night in this part of the world when it's day somewhere else, and they actually think about something, or the situation is actually told, we respond, and that is respected pretty heavily, and that quality is gone. Earlier it used to be kind of dumb support services, but not anymore. Now it's actually outputs, creative outputs that make sense for any businesses. If you ask me what is the South Asian identity, I don't want to use the word phrase again, but if you ask me what is the identity that we bring to the table, it is that response. There is a term in Hindi, I mean there's some people from India probably, there's a term in Hindi to say this, it's called jugaad. The best possible, jugaad basically means the closest possible English meaning comes from this phrase called life hack. I don't know so it's basically the response that you do to something that has gone wrong. It's like ability to use a plastic container, cut it up and use it as a cell phone holder. So those kind of problem solving abilities in an extremely short period of time as life hacks, and ability to elevate it to a certain level that is appreciable and valuable more than anything else. People are willing to pay a premium for this. I think that's what I would think is our identity.
Do you have a response to that or anything to add?
No, I absolutely agree, and I'm glad we brought back up the Nasdem and the Kosambo conversation, because to add to this standardization from going A to B to Z is also a very linear way of doing things. Without using the word South Asian, let me just say our region or our identities, who I am. Are we actually linear people? Is linear the way that we solve problems? What he just mentioned as going with the plastic bottle and making it something else to respond to a crisis situation is not a linear way. That is absolutely lateral. That's the way we solve problems. That's what has kept us alive, keep us resilient. That's why our languages and identities are still alive after thousands of years. So, sorry, but Kosambo and Randhula cannot be made standardized or lenient. Good, if you want to cook it in your home in London, good. But if you come to the source and when we serve it to you here, I think what makes it unique and special is to have it set in London.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add this stuff of like, we know grandmothers, I'm sure this is true in Sri Lanka too, we know our grandmothers and how they solve immediacy of a problem by using stuff that is around, right? Like that. And I think that is kind of intrinsic to I would say a tropical, growing up. I would say that's a maturity of a region like this, and that response again is something that doesn't come easy. And that response is rooted in not being able to predict. If you can predict it, then you will already have the solution there.
Yeah, I mean, responding to what you said about India is, chaotic, but here I think it's as chaotic as India, but we just hide it in our heads and we just deal with it on a daily basis, maybe. Perfect. Okay. So moving on to the next round.
Round really sounds like we are fighting.
Yeah. So actually, to Randhula, as a design student, I had to kind of defend my work when I present and show my work. And this was like always like it felt like predatory to me, like how are you going to defend your work? But I saying like you have been tutoring me for like all this semester and now you want to you want me to defend my work. But and so you were in a startup accelerator before you found Good Life X. What is your personal experience in articulating the values that you stand for? This might overlap with before, and I would like to also this idea of defending and articulating to both of you, starting with you.
I mean, defending, like I alluded to in my answering the previous round, still is something that is asked of us when you're forming a new narrative or when you're presenting new work. But what has changed is we don't go to defense mode anymore, but we really flip the narrative to a positive offense. It's something that we proactively present before we have to explain ourselves. And this comes from the knowledge of knowing that in South Asia, our communities are deeply networked. Our markets are very informal. And we can't copy-paste what worked in Silicon Valley or elsewhere to work here. And it's simply that. And we know for a fact that how tourism works in Colombo isn't the way tourism works in Galle. So how is that different when we are showing ourselves in the global market, or is showing up as a Sri Lankan founder, a business, or whoever we are in the world? How are we then asked to play the norm, which is not ours? And this is what we're trying to redefine. And without playing defense anymore, how are we playing positive offense is by connecting with so many other collaborative partners and people who see the world the same way we do, or want to convert into this narrative and really grow that circle even stronger, because alone we can't do anything. That is something we've understood a long time ago. So we try to collaborate as much as possible locally, but also regionally. We also work with Indian counterparts who understand this work and are doing very deep rooting and recruiting of this work. So that's really how we play South Asian. I'm not saying that it's more understood, it takes time. But I think that's where we come in to understand that this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. We really have to be in it for the long run and to really bite the bullet and keep going. So this is how we see it, and the beauty is that it doesn't come from point of frustration anymore, but understanding and knowing that this is what it takes to build the work. And our strength comes from collaborating and working with more and more people who think and work like us.
Same thing. I mean, so two anecdotal things that I want to talk about. In 2000, I think what's popularly known as the dot-com bubble had actually happened at that point in time. Strangely, till 98, I was a graphic designer doing work for print, and 98 onwards, I slowly moved towards tech and kind of used both tech and graphic design to kind of create the new fangled thing that was coming up then, which was called Creative for Technology, and eventually has become UI and UX now, and it's sinking. That's a different story. We'll talk about that later. But I was actually I was supposedly decent at my work because there were very few graphic designers were doing this, and so I was actually moved to London, seconded to London. I won't mention the company, but I was seconded to London as a part of a team that had to do some stuff. And I had to report to someone who's probably the most racist person that I've ever worked with, right? Since I won't mention the name, I can say anything about it. Right? But the truth is that he was appalled that somebody from India can do graphic design. This is, we are talking about 2000, it's like 26 years back. And so that is anecdote number one. So the view of ability to me proving what I have to do or defending myself was purely in the work and nothing else. So I had to actually do the work. while everybody was taking vacations for Christmas, the work was done, which would have taken probably 8 days for everybody else, and it took like 4 days for me. It doesn't in no way shows my prowess or anything. It's just that I was alone, sitting quietly and working. Nobody else was around. So that is point number one. The difference actually is in the work that you do, and I think that's the craft that you learn and you prove over time. The second thing that I want to talk about is that the entire idea of defending, unfortunately, today we run a business. I run a business which is out of Dallas, Texas. My brother takes care of the stuff there. I do here. It's a product company. We are constantly presenting our quote-unquote business case. Now, business case is a template. Business case, whether it's Silicon Valley or whether it's Bombay or whether it's Colombo or in Bangalore, a business case is written in a certain way. The narrative is already given to you. So you've got to kind of put your numbers in a certain way. You've got to do it in a certain way. But we actually, the last one that we did, we threw that out of the window and went to a storytelling that we thought was appropriate. Right? And this comes from, you can say anything, it comes from creativity or arrogance. It doesn't really matter. But the truth is it comes from there. But the response that we got was fabulous because it's quite differentiated. And we always need to think about that we are in the differentiation business. We are in the business where you've got to kind of place something elsewhere. And as South Asian people, as the stories that we have heard and we have actually told and what your grandmothers have told, the narratives here is different. And that ability to use a narrative to defend your work is something that I fall back on. I love it and I fall back on that a lot. Right? So for me, it's inventing a new narrative constantly, not falling back to something that is already there.
Perfect. So after my next few questions, we are going to open the floor for questions from you. So if you're just zoning out earlier, no. Okay, so you guys can think about the questions. I would like to sort of connect to that and actually another anecdotal story. I have one of my friends, Japanese friend, she really loves coming here to Sri Lanka to travel because nothing happens on time. That's a reason. But is there something in that? I'm just asking, and that kind of sets the limit there for the question. What can we tell about the importance of building businesses that truly aligns with the way we live and the way that we have been living, not just as regionally as in our cultures, but as humans. What is the importance of that? Can we, just like we are inventing narratives, can we think about the workplaces, how we run our meetings, how we take care of our employees, take care of our people? Do we call them employees, or do we call them, what do we call them? If we can just imagine the future, like a parallel reality where all these things are happening, what would it look like?
Sure. I'm going to pick it up from where you left that one word you used. Business case is your temple, and how you put that away and brought out a narrative. And what we do with our work is we build a new temple. Temple that's coming from where we are in the temple. So it's our own temple, which is a way of narrating how businesses work, businesses are built, and how we take ourselves out to the world. We can call it a business model canvas, but it's a lot more than that. We've really baked in our heritage practices, the stories our grandmothers told us, how we build our houses, how we have death rituals, 7 days, 3 months to 1 year to etc. How all of these really play out in our personal lives and within our family circles. What happens when we bring it to business? Because business is made by people, for people. Why do we have to consider and take it out as a different and a separate identity which is Western or is not ours? This is what we really trying to redefine, and it's been 3 years now since we launched the Regenerating Inclusive Business Model Canvas, as we call it. And the response that we get from the region itself I think is very heartening because people recognize this as something a lot more, something that they can belong to, something that feels like home basically. So how do you build a business which is for profit or non for profit that feels like home and it's coming from a place that is very precious to you and very personal to you as opposed to something that you leave after 9 to 5. So I think in exploring this, it's a journey that we are still on. There's a lot of unlearning to do is what we are learning. Not just ourselves, but when we take it to audiences, when we take it to corporates or to small businesses, it's a lot of unlearning to do to put down things that you have practiced or have been working through as systems that are industrially around from the 1990s, to put all of that baggage down and to embrace a new version of building businesses and building value. And that starts with how we look at things and how easily can we let go. South Asians are very fluid people. We just don't allow our fluidity to come to our business. I think that's the biggest thing that we have to get out of, get ahead of. And this is not to say embrace the chaos. I don't see what we have here as chaos. So it's not linear versus chaos or system versus chaos. That again is Western ways. In my opinion, this is nothing against the West. I mean, that's a separate identity, and ours is a separate identity, and we all can thrive if we understand that we all have our own ways of thriving. So this is not anti-capitalist or anti-colonial or whatever. This is purely, let's look inward, right? That's what I'm saying. But if we take a look at the word chaos, that's originating from the same place where we saw nature as something that we have to conquer, as forests as a mess. And this is where monoculture then came from. This is where we pride ourselves in acres and acres and acres of tea or coconut without really seeing palm oil, without really seeing how intercropping is much more, I'm not going to use the word sustainable, but much more friendly for people and the planet. Why? It's not aesthetically pleasing and it's not asymmetric, it's not linear. So I think the chaos, the word is I think wrong, but that symbiotic relationship is what we have grown out of, that we need to go back into because that's who we are. And if you just take a look at your personal lives, I'm pretty sure there's so many aunties, nephews, uncles, cousins here. We are all so interconnected. There's only a degree of 0.5 separation in South Asia to know somebody. And this is the interconnectedness that is there in every aspect of our lives and business. So why don't we really start with that without trying to alienate, standardize, and systemize things into a very small shell that it shouldn't be and need not belong to or be in. So I think we need to step away from minimizing ourselves to something 10101, which is so easily codable, but really embrace the complexity that we have, which is what we're trying to do in our work and in building our own temple to define how businesses can work.
So I would actually talk about business in two possible ways, right? There is the entire idea of value generation, and I completely agree with Randhula from a value perspective. That's got to be profit, people, planet kind of a stuff, which is what we've got to embrace, and the complexity that is there and all that. Let's leave that aside. I mean, the one thing that I would learn from the colonizers is actually governance. The ability to document things in the right possible way, the ability to actually leave specific indicators that you can know whether something is on or off, or something is going up or down, or that kind of a stuff. In such a vast thing like the empire where the sun never set, right? And the truth is, I mean, I'm talking as if that happened ages back. The present creative conglomerates like the Adequacy Network works exactly the same way. So they were business enterprises that for profit actually started ruling places because they had to make money. But there are some parts, I mean, it is not a wise thing, which is not, I'm not talking about the virtuosity of that, but I think there are things to learn, which is actually the documentability of things, ability to kind of understand and define these indicators of sort, and measure them and track them as they go. And that's something that I would say has helped the Asian businesses a lot than it, it would have otherwise. I think Asian businesses, like we embrace, I mean, I am using the word, but embrace chaos in any possible way, smart, right? But I don't think that's not a good way to see businesses as. So I would think there are things to learn from colonizers too.
I want to add to this. I think you brought a fantastic and very important point, and I'm going to mirror that back into this very incident that we are talking about, colonization, right? When British came to India, the GDP contribution of India to the world was, correct me if I'm wrong, 36%, right? And when British left India, the GDP contribution of India to the world was 2% or 2.6%. Okay, yeah, so but single digits. So this is a result of extractive ways of things happening, our value creation being taken out. But I think this is where governance come to play, and documentation and measurement need to come into our gaze and our chaos or our complexity, because that's a really good way to avoid this repeating again. And these are the good things that we must embrace and put into our DNA as we evolve and move forward to, obviously South Asia is rising to be the next big power economy. And when we move into that, it's very important that we move with these things so that it doesn't happen in a very different sort of way all over again.
Lovely. So just to add two notes of my own, and then we'll move to the audience. One is I feel that talking about colonization, this sort of okay, we are an island, but the mainland India is was divided arbitrarily, and I feel like this term South Asia or like whatever has given us another way to kind of unite ourselves in a region. I don't know whether it's necessary or should be. It's something to think about. And the other sort of main nimitta for this panel was that we have been for last 10 years we have been doing funds at MONIAC, trying to build this thing, and we are in the view of, and our belief is that funds are infrastructure to cultural work, economic activity, and everything that a society functions on. So, and we know like critical infrastructure is the most underfunded, underappreciated stuff that is around the world, and something that we have realized is, any sort of model of thinking about funds that comes from the West didn't fit what we were trying to do here, what we have been doing here. That's why we have been focused on building community, thriving community, rather than doing any, this is the first time that we are actually doing any sort of a public event under the name MONIAC. We have been supporting the community, thriving community, and building the interest and building community. And now after a decade, we are thinking about how do we sustain and how when we look to the future. So that's where I messaged on the WhatsApp group. We have to coordinating as well. I was very looking forward to this, because these exact things have been the things that we are pondering about. How do we set up our systems? What our KPIs can, how do we operate? So I have more questions than answers. That's the best thing I think out of this sort of a dialogue that we can go to. So we would like to open the floor for any questions or remarks. Yes, it's a dialogue, so.
From here, you look at Sri Lanka and then India, and there are a lot of, and India itself splits up into various communities completely different. But from the West, South Asia is identical to India, right? So is that a good thing, or is that something, bad, that we feel that Sri Lanka is different and India will have 10 or 20 different communities which see their own identities. But from the West, if you look from America, South Asia is 100% India, as well as all the bad things you hear about it is being given to all the places rather than to that particular place. So like Pakistan had some problems, and that is reflected in the whole of South Asia.
Yes, the only answer that I have for this is, like in Europe, if you actually go to the English, if you're talking to the English, not English, I would say the British people, they will actually point out the differences between them and the French. They don't say what's common. They actually, because they fight a lot. So they say what's the difference between the French and them, right? Or if you talk to the French, even though French speaking, they'll tell you what's the difference between Swiss and them, right? But I've been in Sri Lanka many times now. The stuff that we love talking about is what's quite like Sri Lanka in my house, or what's quite like me, my house here. Today I was sitting at an artist lunch, and most of the talk is about this. Most of the talk is about the commonality. I mean, strangely, I'm going back to food again. The acid, or rather the souring agent that we use souring agents. And it's just that there is tamarind in one place, there is kokum in another place, there is, they mentioned something else, I forget. There is something else in the coast here. But we are trying to desperately connect the commonality rather than actually create a divisive line in one sense. But you're right, that diversity that exists, of which if there is a thread that connects the commonality, I'm happy with that. We don't need to be all alike. It will be boring. Life will be so boring if everybody's alike, right? But this commonality thread is quite brilliant. The Western gaze is kind of takes only the commonality and doesn't look at the diversity at all. Except for themselves when they compare it to their neighbor. If they look at Asia, the Occident versus the Orient, the entire Orient can be boxed into one big basket, which is about millions of gods and that kind of stuff. Like I keep saying that the snake charmer narrative, right? Which is actually what it's supposed to be, really. But what I love is that the diversity that we have. And the truth is, sir, every 40 kilometers things change in Tamil Nadu, in India. I mean, you can walk into another state, and I'm sure that's the same thing here. Like you have, even if it is small, 40 kilometer Sri Lanka probably is closer to the one border to the other, or one coast to the other. But even if it is so, there are differences between these areas, right? Like yesterday, we had, I keep going back to food, I don't know, there's something wrong with me. Yesterday we had food in a place which he specifically mentioned that it's a Jaffna type of food. So for me, it was all Sri Lankan until somebody mentioned there is Jaffna and there's a Jaffna food and a Colombo-like food or a South-like food. So I think we are celebrating the commonality, which is fabulous, and when, in the diversity. That's what my point would be on this.
Coming from the fact that they were all of British colony.
Yeah, so the problem
that India was different states.
Yeah.
They were brought under one and affected Sri Lanka and Burma and South Asia in a way was a British colony.
It was. So I go back to the same argument that I did earlier, right? For governance, it's a great thing. I don't know whether values kind of unite in any possible way. The colonizers, the British were fabulous in governance. That meant that they unified when they wanted to, they split us up when they wanted to, right? But I don't know whether that's a great practice. We actually identify it from a value perspective. What does money mean to us? What does food mean to us? What does the sea mean to us? Is a very different thing, and we connect there. We don't connect in just the aspect of everything was one state which was drawn by some Englishman on a piece of paper somewhere. Somebody drew a border in Pakistan and India was separated and there's strife always. But even today, people talk about how, and fight, jovially fight about the fact which side of the border was butter chicken really born on. Which is a fantastic thing. Which is actually that commonality is what we should celebrate. And it's, yeah.
To add to that, I think as South Asians, we are not exposed to each other enough. My exposure to South Asia goes back to as recent as 2022. I'm not proud about that. And that is because we are often reaching out to so far as West or East Asia, where quote-unquote economies or countries are developed, because we don't see value in our own region. And this also comes out then as misrepresentation or misunderstandings between people in the region. We have a certain stereotype when we think of Indian origin people. Same about Sri Lankans from Indian origin people. I know this, I'm not going to say what it is, but we all know what we're talking about. But the moment we get to work together, to collaborate, to be in each other's homes, to listen to each other's stories, or to understand how each other's businesses work, what we say yes to, what we say no to, and how are we reframing the narrative, really brings us closer. I mean, for me, it's like a massive eye that I've had in the past 3 years, collaborating much more closely with people in our own region. And I think it's the only way to undo the Western gaze of seeing South India only as South Asia as only as India, or to resolve this disparity of identity and really claim the diversity that we have.
Right, yeah. It's very easy to point at a common enemy, but I think 10th century India colonized Sri Lanka. Cholas actually so yeah, so history tells a lot of stories. So.
Okay, so I don't see any more hands up, but I'm pretty sure you have ideas and things to say and a lot of things to write on those sticky notes. Okay, thank you so much for showing up and sitting through. We have the next panel. Just in 5 minutes, we'll start our next panel on new ways of design. So the panels and these discussions are progression. So we're going to conclude tomorrow evening. So we have 5 more panels left. Each one is going to be connected to the next one. We are building a narrative about all these things that we have been discussing about. Just to add you to the point of, yes, I was very lucky in very early in my career. I got to go to India and experience, like share experience there and share, because that's why the later forms are like really a nice way to understand cultures and see where we share these commonalities, because they're just these little things which attracts meaning and absorb meaning, and then they radiate meaning as well. So they stand on their own and you can see these common parts and common ways. And I absolutely agree with you about not having enough exposure to our own region is and I think that is a great kind of ending to this discussion. That would be a good starting point.
I just wanted to ask you, is the next panelist here? They're already here? Yes, I mean, you should just tell them to get a blanket. It's just freezing out here. So,
okay, thank you so much. One last thing, as I told you, our KPIs for as curators, moniac.com, you can go and just drop your email address, so we know that there are people interested about knowing when more things like this happens. So depending on the number of sign-ups, we'll decide whether we are going to do more of this stuff. And sticky notes, please, yes, do that. And we'll start our next panel in 10 minutes here in this space. Also, we are taking some voice cuts for the promos and stuff, you know, the drill. Please do your thing and help us continue this discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you for the panelists. Thank you.